All right, I see some folks already here. The organized people who were ready to go had their links at hand. Even when when I'm working from home and I don't leave my desk, I'm still like flying from meeting to meeting at the last minute, digging for my link. Welcome, everyone. Gold star for you. Exactly. You all get gold stars. In fact, anybody that shows up in the next 2 minutes gets a gold star. I call that very timely. But the folks that were here before we started, they can have two. Hi, folks. Welcome. In a couple minutes, I'll ask you to drop your name in the chat, but let's wait because it disappears. People don't see the uh, chat that happened before they entered the meeting. So we don't want that to go away. Welcome, everyone. We'll get a minute, give it a couple minutes. We're getting into the weeds today on operational stuff. I love this. Oops. See, Chloe.
Spoiler alert.
Advanced slides before it's time. I
Spoiler.
really should not be trusted to run technology, but welcome, folks. We'll give it a minute. I think I can handle technology and I can handle talking, but I can't do them at the same time because they're two different parts of my brain and skill sets, and uh, it doesn't work.
I think that's fair.
Some people can do both at the same time, but not me. Well,
Sometimes I can't even do one. I have a pick the time. So
welcome. It's a beautiful September day here. I hope everybody's enjoying their September. Christy is wearing a poofy jacket, which we love. She has an event tonight, and what's the theme?
uh dreamlike, dreamy, whimsical.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes.
I honestly thought you just came into the office wearing that, and I was like, I love it so
It's a lot for a webinar on
much.
holiday closures.
On a Wednesday. That's all
On
right.
Wednesday.
We wear what we want to wear when we want to wear it.
Holiday closures. Chloe missed opportunity. We each should have dressed up like a holiday,
Yep,
like a turkey or a Santa Claus.
absolutely. Christy is always styling. Right.
Next time, I'll remember for next time.
I have on tights with bats on them, but you can't see them. So
I saw them.
that's holiday like.
Anything special about my outfit, unfortunately.
Now, see, you could lie. You got a tutu on, which
Right.
is
Yeah, nobody knows it, but I've got a giant tutu on right now.
oh, if only, if only. I am pro costume days in the office, to be honest. Not for Halloween, just for anything. All right, we'll give it another minute. We still got folks coming in. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, folks. This is timely, right before we get hit the holidays.
Which are very fast approaching.
Um, they are. Somebody once pointed out that when you're a child, one year is a huge proportion of your life. So when you're 10, a year is like 1/10 of your life. But as you get older, it's a smaller and smaller percentage of your life, which is why time actually seems to go faster.
Hmm.
But it sure is flying. All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and sort of start to get started here with some housekeeping. I would love it if folks would drop their name and organization in the chat, or if they're not with an organization, what part of the country they're calling in from. It's always nice to see all that information. We are going to talk today about closure policies. And first, I'm going to get to some housekeeping items. If you have questions as we go, drop them in the Q&A. Sometimes the chat rolls by so fast we miss it. Sometimes it doesn't, but if you put it in the Q&A, it will guarantee we see it. This is being recorded. We will send out the recording at the end of the webinar, and we will also provide some links at the end of the webinar to register for the next one and request a follow-up meeting if you are looking for such a thing. With that, I'm going to kind of kick us off and talk about just in general the idea of closing. And I'll tell you an anecdote. When we started 412 Food Rescue, we never closed. We never stopped operating on any given day, on any day, on any holiday, even Christmas. We were doing some things, even though almost everybody was closed. And we were a small team. We weren't doing a lot, so it wasn't a huge lift, but we were really hesitant to close down. And we had this mindset that, there's food to be rescued, right? And there's people that need food. And it's really, really, really hard to say no. It's really hard to make that decision. And I will tell you, our ops team, and probably you've all had the same experience, are the first ones to say, we don't have to close, right? But even the ops team needs a break. If for no other reason, I think sometimes giving your team a day off, a day not to worry about work, a day where you don't have to juggle schedules is really great. But there are some other things that go into that calculus. And so I want to talk a little bit about how do you make that decision? That's something that I know a lot of organizations sort of evolve into or trip into or fall into. So we've got some great guests with us today. We've got Christy Abercrombie, who is the Director of Food Recovery Logistics. Is that right? Close to right?
Close. Director of Logistics and Operational Strategy.
Okay. At 412 Food Rescue, who also comes out of a logistics background. So we're really lucky to have her. And Chloe Salia. And actually, I don't know your title.
I am Food Rescue Operations Coordinator.
Great, from Hunger Network Food Rescue. And so two folks who are really in the trenches on this issue. And I want to talk today, I want to get your insight today on the whole process of going from should we close to how do we close and how do you implement that? So we're going to start with a question is what is the thought process behind the decision to close ops? How do you make that hard decision? Chloe, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, this is a field that's integral to so many people's lives on a daily basis. So I don't think this decision is something that we make lightly. I do think that there's a lot that goes into it. So, we have to gauge our partner availability, our donor availability, our volunteer availability. And then from there, we have to, decide for staff what's right for us. We are a very small organization. I am the ops department, so this is pretty much it for that. So, 20 to 30 rescues a day is a lot more manageable to, worry about stuff, reroute things, anything like that.
But it's
So I guess
also
that,
more important to close because it's just you. And when you don't
yeah,
close, it's on your shoulders.
yeah, that's exactly the where I was going with that. So, I know everything. I know all the ins and outs. And, if I were to get coverage for that, you have to explain everything. So I think there's really a lot that goes into it. And it's a lot to tackle. So I would say that it's very situational for us just because of our size. I can go into details if you want about specific instances or if you want to hold off a little bit on that for another later or.
Well, I'll get Christy to weigh in a little bit and then we can talk about some specific examples.
All right. So we are 100% full closures 13 days of the year. So we have 13 staff holidays, the majority being federal holidays, as Chloe pointed out. And like Jen said, when 412 first opened, they ran all the time. And when I first came into my role, for most holidays, we still had partial closures. So while we would cancel fleet routes, we would still run our volunteer routes, which then still meant staff had to work. And it was the ops staff, specifically our dispatchers, that gave the biggest pushback of, oh, we
Like,
run, we want to stay open. It's too messy if we close. I got all kinds of excuses until we really looked at how many calls actually came in, how much food was actually rescued, like what actually happened here. And I made the decision based on data and my staff's needs that and you can visit my panel, Come Food Rescue Hero Conference on culture and morale, that they deserve to be off just like the rest of the staff. So we have full closures all 13 of those days. And we will get into a couple slides down the road here on how we go about doing that and managing that. But that was, again, based on my staff needs. And also, most of our nonprofits are typically closed as well, or you have a lot of rerouting to do. So while they were worried about the after work, there was still a lot of work going in beforehand as well.
yeah.
Now, the one note at the bottom, don't be afraid to revise. You can make changes, you can make pivots. We actually just changed those 13 days this year. We made changes. We found that Indigenous Peoples Day, most of our MPPs are closed and we're out here running, which causes a lot of stress, especially for our fleet operators. So we closed that day. A trade-off was we're now open the day after Thanksgiving, which was a typical 412 holiday. So I didn't make a lot of friends when I made that suggestion, but it's right for the operation because that was past volunteers. We were mandating operation staff to work on that day. Well, again, half of our operation had the day off. And let's face it, that's such a huge food day, and we're in the food business. So we need to be open that day.
Yeah, there's two things I want to call out there. One is that you're talking about using data, real data, to look at what's actually happening. Because, like you said, nobody wants to close. Nobody wants to do the work of closing. We're all very passionate about saving food. So being able to look and say, well, we're actually not rescuing that much. A lot of our MPPs are closed, nonprofit partners are closed. Using that data to kind of make the case, number one, but number two, also then making that management decision that the staff actually needs to have some time off, that it's better for the health of the staff and the morale of the staff long term, which is better for the organization to have some days where you're fully closed. And so I think those are two really great things to take into account when you're thinking about closing. And if you're a one person operation or a small team where it's, there's two folks on staff or there's one person doing operations, being able to say, I want some downtime is really hard. Or I need a day off. That's really hard. And a lot of us don't want to do it, but I think that's really important. That's really critical. Um, so I want to talk a little bit. I know you mentioned some specific case studies, Chloe, and I think this is kind of where we can get into that as well, is what does it mean to close? Because I think there's different levels of closing that I've heard you talk about. There's a full closure where nothing is happening at all. There's partial, maybe based on the status of the donors and the nonprofits. You could run it based on the volunteers, let the volunteers decide. And I suspect there's probably some other calculus that go into that as well. So what does it mean when we think about closing, and how do you decide which level of closure to implement?
Yeah, so I think, a lot of it is dependent on the holiday. So about 2 weeks prior to any major holiday, we do get together as a team and we kind of like take a look at all of the factors. So for full closure, it's generally a huge holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, where almost every single site, nonprofit partner, donors, they're closed. So that's basically a full closure. Although I should say that we have recipient pickups that happen pretty much every day. So we don't like to call them full closures because we like to leave it up to them. If they're open, if they want to pick it up, that's completely up to them. But then on the other hand, with the volunteers, there are times when, I've gotten volunteers that message me like, hey, like, what's the plan for Thanksgiving? Like, I know for a fact that this place is open and I would love to pick it up. And so then you kind of have to work around, be like, hey, are you open, to see if they can deliver? So we do actually have we have a group rescue every Wednesday from a produce distributor. And this last Thanksgiving, they all went and they sent a picture. It's in the slides, so you'll see it a little bit later, but they had like a little Thanksgiving party at the dock, and it was really cute. So a lot of our volunteers just, it's like a commitment, you know, like they don't want to give it up just because it's a holiday. Um, so I think, you know, there's a lot of factors, and then we do for some, I don't want to say not major holidays, because, you know, the federal holidays are major, but there are some that a lot of sites stay open for. I want to say like Labor Day, Memorial Day. We have a lot of nonprofits that are open, and a lot of stuff is happening around that time of year anyway for nonprofits. So you want to make sure that they're getting the right stuff that they need. So, you know, if you have to do a little bit of workarounds or whatever, I mean, on Labor Day, we had 4 reroutes and we stayed open for, I think, 25 rescues. So it's kind of a walk in the park for a holiday at least. So I think, you know, it's very situational for us just because of our size. You know, it's easy to reroute 4, whereas if you're dealing with hundreds of rescues a day and you have to reroute 20 or 30 of them, that's going to be a much different scenario than what I'm dealing with. So
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, that it's like you said, 2 rescues are easy to manage, as opposed to, 25. Christy?
So I said we have all full closures now. That wasn't always the case, and we had partial closures. And what a partial closure looked like at 412 was that typically we would run volunteer rescues. We would do those reaches, find out who's going to be open, who's going to be closed, and then volunteers would run. And then we would leave fleet operations up to volunteers. So if we would have 2 operators volunteer, then we would run a truck and we would do some fleet routes. But that was, again, volunteer only. That's typically how we would run a partial closure. And then we wouldn't take any ad hocs. It would just be our regular reoccurring weekly rescues.
Now, just a question for both of you. When you sort of let the volunteers decide, if they're going to go, or not, how do you prepare in advance for potential problems?
So I've been lucky enough where I haven't had to, you know, deal with that. The only problem that I've had is that, oh man, you know, I was really looking forward to it, but you know, I'll do it next week. That's the worst of it. So far it's been good.
And we have some volunteers that even with a full closure that still do there as well. And that's fine. But when we do that communication, letting them know that we're going to be closed and they say, well, we're going to run it anyways. And we say, that's great. You do what you need to do, but we will not be available if you run into any issues. So they know that ahead of time.
That's great. That level of communication, I think, is so important because, and we talk about this with donors too. They can handle a volunteer not showing up one day as long as you let them know that, the volunteer is not coming. I think as long as everybody has full information, it makes it easier for people to decide what they're comfortable to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the big question though is, how do you shut it down? It's really easy to talk about whether or not to close. And I know this is one of the things that really kind of got in the way uh, of 412 at least deciding to do a full closure. And what that's the concern, is that's going to be a lot of work. So what does the process look like when you do a shutdown?
Chloe, you can take the lead.
Yeah, for sure. So like the rest of this, is always a lot that goes into it. So like I said before, about, you know, 2 or 3 weeks before the major holiday, we do get together. We kind of go over what needs to be done. So our partnerships manager, I'm sure, you know, nonprofit manager, whatever you guys have, same thing. Um, they'll ask, you know, the sites like, you know, like what are your holiday hours? Like this is if we're staying open, you know, we decide like, well, actually, this is not. I'm sorry, I'm getting this all out of order. So, you know, we ask if they're open, then we kind of figure out if they're open or not, what the right path is to take. So, if they're closed, that's when we will shut down. So, Sorry, give me 1 second to regain my thoughts here. I'm like trying to think about the processes. So yeah, okay. So, we find out that, Giant Eagle isn't open this day. We ask the nonprofit if they're open, they're not open. So both sites are not open. There's no point in, doing anything with that. So, we'll let them know like, hey, food rescue is shutting down for this day. We let our volunteers know before we do anything in the web app because that we don't want to cause any kind of disaster, like, oh, why is my rescue canceled? So, about a week prior to the holiday, or if not more, we'll let them know like, hey, it's Thanksgiving. Um, rescues are canceled for the day. Spend time with your family. If you have any questions, let me know. And then you go to the web app and then you cancel them. You let them know they're being canceled, everything. That's pretty much the gist of it. There's, some smaller things, for Giant Eagle, especially grocery stores in general, it can be really hectic trying to shut it down because the next day it's like crazy. We got
Yeah.
like boxes and boxes of stuff, and then that's when all the crazy stuff happens. So it's good for a day, and then you have to get back to business. So
Yeah. Do you do any prep for, or do you anticipate what's going to happen on the other side of the holiday, knowing that you're going to have extra large donations?
I think for us, it really is case by case, dependent on the holiday. Most nonprofits during Thanksgiving and Christmas, especially, they'll take really long breaks. They'll be out for like 2 weeks. So we have a holiday calendar there where we try and track as much as we can, which can be an issue. But we figure out who is open on those days, and then we'll reach out for Giant Eagle, especially, you'll say, Giant Eagle generally has bigger donations. Will you guys be open the next day to possibly receive, pending availability? But most of the time, I'm just ready to lock in the next day because it's hard to promise things with food rescue, as you probably know, but usually do a day of kind of thing.
I'm gonna switch back. Oops, nope. Go back to Christy on that question.
Sure. So we have an SOP and we have checklists of what does going into a holiday closure look like. So that SOP has been fine-tuned over the course of the past year. And everybody is, as far as like our dispatchers and our relationships team, they know what needs to be done at this point. So closure calls are done 1 week ahead on the same day as the closure. So if you're closed on a Monday, it's the Monday before that you want to do those calls. Because the people that, especially on the nonprofit side, the people who are going to be working, or if it's a Monday, then that's when they're going to be there. If you try to call on a Wednesday, they might not even be staffed on a Wednesday. So that's some trial and error that we've learned is really makes those calls go a lot smoother is when you do it on the same day of the week. The calls are done. Our nonprofit manager calls the nonprofits to let them know of the closure, and then any issues for the following day when we open. The donor manager contacts the food donors. Same question of, do you think you'll have extra donations the next day? Do you think we should put on an additional rescue? And then our dispatchers contact the volunteers. If any volunteers say, I'm going to continue with this rescue, then that template or that rescue will remain open. All others will be canceled. So what is a big influence here is the size. Well, Chloe's already said, like, it's pretty much her and she has a partners manager helping. Obviously, we have multiple people, but we have a lot of rescues per day. So the size of your staff, the amount of rescues you have a day are going to influence how you go about this process. But regardless of whether it's a team of one or a team of five, having an SOP and having checklists are going to make it way smoother.
Yeah, because you're talking like probably 600 or 700 rescues a week at this point, Christy, that you've got to make phone calls
Yes.
for closures, which is just an incredible number of partners to contact.
Yeah. And when we say phone calls, like utilize all electronics you have available. We text, we make phone calls, we send emails, wherever that, you see the most reaction or where people are going to respond.
Yeah.
So that's we've typically just volunteers answer text messages, food donors answer phone calls, nonprofits answer emails.
Um, and maybe I'll ask this question later. Okay. Um, oh, here's your holiday closure message, Chloe.
Yeah, so it's pretty basic, but it does help when everything's streamlined. So all of our messages, this is very basic. It's a Word document. We just copy and paste it for the holiday. Um, if you're getting like if they look different for different holidays and it's the same volunteer, I feel like it just kind of is a little screwy and you're like, oh, well, what's going on now? If you make it streamlined and so they all look the same, it's like, oh, it's a holiday. Okay, I know what to do. Very basic, but it helps. We don't have like a ton of SOPs in the way of holiday closures, but like the little things do help and
Yeah.
we will get there. We will get there.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think it's really important to have both you and Christy here talking about this to show that there's like a range of ways to do this and processes that not every organization is going to do it exactly the same. But this can help them think about which of these tools is right for their organization. Do you find that, and this is for either one of you, that your partners, nonprofit donors, volunteers sort of start to get into the rhythm that they know like there's a holiday, they get the holiday call, they know like what's going to happen, and it kind of makes it go smoothly for a lot of them at any rate?
I would say yes, especially at this point. Most of our reoccurring rescue volunteers, they've worked through multiple closures now. So at this point, they know the drill.
Yeah, I assume that with 13 a year, uh, not accounting for staff turnover, but everybody kind of gets used to it, gets in the rhythm, knows, okay, we're going to be closed, and they know what to do. So as hard as it is the first time,
Mhm.
it sort of you get into a rhythm with it, and so do your partners.
Yeah, it took about 3.
That's right. Okay. That's good to know, everybody. It takes about three. Chloe?
Yeah, I'm a very visual learner, so this is
Yeah.
kind of like my process when it comes to rerouting for holidays. So, like I said, for some of the not as big holidays, it's just easier to reroute 3 or 4 rescues than it is to close all operations, because that can be really crazy.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like a timeline of where I go. So we start with that meeting. That's the first step. We find out who's open, who's not open. Once we have that, I have this very basic Excel template where it's a table, it says donor, nonprofit, volunteer, and then the last column is empty for like a rerouted where it's going. So it's a working document, very basic. I should have put it in here, but I did not. It's not anything special. So I fill that out. Then it's like a to-do list for me. So I start with one, then I go to the next one. So this is a map. If you look in the corner, it's a Google map. It's a great tool. If you guys aren't using it, you can upload Excel sheets. So the green ones are nonprofit partners. The blue ones are our donors. The red ones are, we call those lacking recipients who kind of want to be on the lookout for stuff, people who don't receive as much. So this map is super helpful because you can easily pinpoint where the donors are and the nonprofit partners are as well. So that's kind of my main tool. I'll like scroll around, I'll see, okay, I click on them, then I go to their web app profile, I see, okay, they're open today. They're not in the calendar, so they're good to go. So that's kind of where I go from there. Then obviously, we reach out to the volunteers. You say, hey, for this holiday, are you cool with rerouting? Let me know if not, because a lot of the time if it's a holiday, they want it off. That's perfectly fine. We kind of figure out subs from there. I feel like I'm talking about this process really quickly, but I mean, I'm sure you guys know how to reroute stuff. It's the same as a regular reroute. It's just you have to work around those holidays and seeing
Right.
who's open, and that's really the trickiest part.
Yeah, I think it's, one reroute is easy, right? It's on a holiday though, you get that magnified. And I think that's why having these processes in place, whether it's an official, SOP, Christy's team does really great work at making SOPs, but you know, or it's just something that you do with spreadsheets and tables. Having that in place helps you stay organized when you have to take that. One thing is really easy, 50 of them is a whole other kettle of fish, and 5 or 600 is, you know, a whole other thing. So having that process in place can help make it go smoothly. And then, and this is what I was thinking about earlier. Well, actually, let's start with challenges. I forgot the order my slides are in. What are the challenges? What are the things that, number one, you wish you knew in advance, but when you started this, that would have made it easier to figure the process out, or you know to look out for? What are those, what are those challenges?
Yeah, so honestly, I would say that one of the biggest challenges we've had is just like communication with everybody. Like it's hard to really pinpoint, like Christy said, everyone responds differently to different methods of communication, and that's really the biggest thing. I would also say that like volunteer complaints is something we get a lot about. Like for some reason, volunteers just love like doing food rescue in the most inconvenient times. And I love them for it. It's amazing. But it's like it's Christmas morning at 8 a.m. and they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that we canceled these. And I was like, oh my God. So I feel well, I'm not because I'm off, so I don't hear about it. They figure it out the hard way, which kind of sucks, but we do our best to let them know, and they say it's okay. But sorry, going on a tangent, my apologies. And like I said before, the
Love
day
the
after
recipes.
the day after holidays are crazy, so just trying to work that out is another challenge we have. And then staff availability, our food rescue team as a whole is three. I'm dispatcher, then we have partnerships manager and a director. So, if one person's off, then it's on two. If two people are off because it's a holiday or whatever, then you've got one person. So it's really just kind of juggling those schedules and making sure that everybody is on the same page with everything.
Yeah. Christy?
Um, so yes to what Chloe said. And then volunteer complaints, they'll kind of die. Like I said, after three, you'll stop getting so many complaints. But a lot of as you're making those reaches and you're making those phone calls, and now your contacts are wrong with your MPPs. And so it's being able to communicate. So we kind of flipped it a little bit and we use it as an opportunity to update admin, to update the app with appropriate contacts, with new holiday schedules, and things like that, even within our donors. But using that opportunity, we're going to be calling to these people. And so why don't we update their information as well? So we also use it as a time to kind of do some audits.
Yeah, that's great. It's so so hard to get correct information for everybody and get them to update when they move or change their phone number or change staff. And we send emails to all the partners. Is this the right information? They don't necessarily answer back. So this is actually a great opportunity to make sure that you have the right info. So that's kind of an added bonus there, I think. Um, okay, so you've got these SOPs in place and you're working to make sure that you have a streamlined process for holidays. Now, as you were talking, Chloe, you were talking about the folks that take off for like 2 weeks, that close for 2 weeks, right? And I was thinking that we've run into, this is eons ago when I was doing ops, which has been a hot minute. So things are different here now. But we'd run into organizations that were closed for the summer, that we were working with schools, or other organizations that had irregular, not full 12-month schedules, and we'd have to adjust. So how does this process help you, one, adjust when you run into situations like that, or two, when you have inclement weather? Is this something that you can use to help you deal with when you have a blizzard, for example? And sorry to the folks that live where there's no snow.
Um, yeah, so if I like understand what you're saying, you're basically saying, for long periods of time, how does it help with like uncertain events?
Yeah, I think I'm asking like, how can you take this process and what you learned from this to and leverage that when either you have, an MPP that shuts down for 2 months, or, a sudden blizzard and you no longer, you have to deal with the fact that a bunch of places are closed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. So, for the, the long period of time break or whatever, actually, this is pretty new in the web app, which I love. You can pause templates now. Love that. But I guess for that, it's really important that we know like sooner rather than later when their breaks are so that we can kind of like for schools, that's a great example. We have a lot of schools that distribute over the weekend or on their way home for kids so that they have something to eat later, like when they're not at school. And in the summer, we've got 3 months of a time period where we have a donor, but we don't have a nonprofit to receive. So it's if you do enough communication, you can set something up for just 3 months, and people are like, "This is perfect because we only operate in the summer." So it's really just about outreach and finding out like who needs what at what time period, and it's a lot of like taking little puzzle pieces and filling it in as you go. And that's really just the tricky part is just being in the know, I guess. Um, for like inclement weather though, for I guess if you don't live somewhere cold where there's no blizzards, I'm sure you have like thunderstorms, heat, just a period of time where like the power's out or something like that for like a whole day, 2 days, something like that. That is honestly one of like way more stressful than holiday closures because it's very last minute. Like even if you know a day in advance, it's so hard to just be able to like reroute stuff. And we have a few like so these are the group rescue I was talking about here. This was Thanksgiving, but they actually they did the same thing on a day when it was -5 degrees outside. I have it right here. It's the same group. So it was -5 outside, no snow or anything, just really, really cold. And we we have a policy that states like if wind chill is, minus I think it's -5 or something, we don't want our volunteers going out and driving because it's dangerous. They were very adamant. They were like, we really want to go and do this. It's important to them. It like, so we let them, what am I'm not the police. I'm not going to tell them they can't. But
You're not
I
the boss
think,
of them.
yeah, exactly. Um, gosh, it's difficult. I'll say that. I think at some point it's like, where do you draw the line between trying to reroute things when almost everyone is closed and just shutting down and having a few people upset? And most of the time they're not even upset. They're more just like a little bit bummed out, but it's when it's blizzarding, you don't want your volunteers on the road. You don't want them risking their lives, other people's lives, just for, you know,
Yeah.
an hour, even if it's just an hour. And if schools aren't open, then you have to reroute that. I think in situations like that, it's just easier just to shut down. I've only had to do that, I think, once in my year of being here. So luckily it hasn't happened too much, but I'm sure Christy has more to say since she's been in the position longer than me. So,
So to answer the first part about extended closures, I think Chloe hit it on the head. It's just communication. And you're just doing a reroute that's extended. And as long as you're communicating that this is temporary, everything should go off fine. But communication with those is the key. With inclement weather, safety is always the number one priority. That's the safety of your staff, your volunteers, and the public. And then another thing to consider is you don't have to just do a full closure, because different parts of your area, depending on your geographic zone, may be hit differently than others. So you could cancel a portion of your rescues while an area that is maybe outside of a flooding zone or is outside of a snow belt is still operational. So take into those considerations of just doing partial closures with the weather. But it is much more stressful for inclement weather because it's a much, you don't have that planning ahead of time. So having your weather policy ahead of time, having your staff know what the escalation points are ahead of time really does remove that stress. And even if you just like in grade school, like if you just have a 2 hour delay while those decisions can be made and you can start later is also an option.
I love that idea. Just a 2-hour delay when the weather's really bad, just put a pause on everything so you can kind of
Yes.
assess the situation. Because it's hard. A lot of rescues are first thing in the morning. And so you're getting up and you've got to make a decision about a whole bunch of things that are moving at that moment. Being able to hit pause would be super helpful.
And we actually did that a couple of times this past winter with our fleet. Just, hey, hold off, give us an hour and a half to make a decision. Don't head to the lot yet. We'll make these decisions and touch base. Or just let, if it's snow, let the salt trucks get out there and give them an opportunity to plow.
Right.
And that's usually all it is. And then same goes for like volunteers. Now you might have to do some extra reaches later on to make sure MPPs and donors are still open, but it's not like it happens. This is a every once in a while thing. So while it's going to be a stressful day, you know that going into it.
Yeah. Just interestingly enough, a couple years ago, we did a study with some folks, I think they were with CMU, where they looked at our missed rescue data. So they looked at how when people failed to claim a rescue, and they looked at the weather, and they found that the number one correlation to people not taking ad hoc rescues was rain, not snow, but was rain. People were least likely to go out when it's raining than they were at any other time. So having that information in advance can be helpful as well. There's a few questions in the chat, but before we get to those, I just wanted to plug next week. We are doing our How to Start a Food Rescue webinar, and we are having Doug Silva from Gotham Food Rescue will be our guest. And even if you're already doing food rescue, I think this is going to be really great. They have a super partnership with the Housing Authority of the City of New York. And they've really, he's got an excellent presentation on working with housing. And so I highly recommend that. So folks, if you haven't signed up for that webinar, you definitely should. And then in October, the 16th and 17th is our food rescue conference. You just heard Christy talk about, she's going to present about, team morale, and it's going to be a super, actually, she's on a really great panel. So definitely go to the website and register for that. With that, I'm going to actually take a look. There's some questions in the Q&A. The first one is from Hassan, and I think we kind of answered this, but let's just go over it again. Is for holidays, when do you decide to close? When you decide to close, do you cancel outright, reschedule, or on a case-by-case basis?
I would say mostly if it's a full closure, then you're canceling it, but sometimes you are gonna have to reschedule it. So it really falls onto a case by case, even it's a partial or a full closure. And that's all gonna come into when you communicate with your donors.
Yep. Chloe, anything to add to that?
Perfect. Perfect answer.
So how do you manage it when a volunteer picks up a rescue and arrives to find the nonprofit partner agency is closed for the holiday, or closed early that day without notice?
That is a problem that I have experienced actually, I wouldn't say a lot, but enough to make it a problem. I mean, that's when you really gotta, get your hands dirty, get your fingers working on that keyboard. Are you open? Are you open? And you get that map out. That's what I do. Someone says, they give me a call, they say, hey, this isn't open. I say, okay, perfect. Are you still there? Do you have 5 minutes to hang out in the parking lot so I can figure this out for you? Every time they've said yes. I've never had an issue with someone not being able to wait 5 or 10 minutes for me to get a hold of somebody. It's all about just that patience and communication. You let them know, okay, I am contacting somebody that's a 10-minute drive from you. Give me 5 minutes to call them, make sure that they know you're coming. That's pretty much how I handle that. And I'm almost always successful. I've never had an issue with that. So.
Yeah, if you're doing a partial closure, then it's really no different than if you would get a phone call any day of the week saying, hey, I'm at my nonprofit and they're not there.
Which happens.
Which absolutely happens for any number of reasons. And so you have to start making calls to send them to somewhere else. And then if you've done a full closure and you don't have anybody on the lines, like when we have a volunteer call, there's a voicemail message that states this is a full closure for us. If you're experiencing a food emergency, we do on our website list some free fridges available for them to possibly go put it in as an option. But they should have been communicated with ahead of time that they're kind of on their own on a full closure holiday.
Yeah, I mean, if they've made that decision to go. Chloe?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I completely forgot what I was gonna say. Oh, no, I remember. So I did one time have a volunteer that experienced exactly what you just said, Christy, a full closure. And I don't know, it was not a volunteer, it was yes, it was. For some reason, I don't remember when or why this was, but they just could not get a hold of us. And they were like, I have no idea what to do with this food. A lot of places were closed. And so they took it home. And then they called me the next day or say, hey, I put this stuff in my fridge. Can I take it somewhere this morning? And it's a lot of the volunteers are very self-sufficient, which I love. And a lot of the time they know places too. Like they're very well connected. I've had people in the same situation, like, hey, this place wasn't closed or wasn't open. I couldn't get a hold of anybody. I took it to, the pantry right by my house.
Yeah.
Which
So
they're the most wonderful types of volunteers.
Yes, they are.
yeah,
And
so
that's true. They do, a lot of them really, they know a lot of different places, especially your regular repeat volunteers who go over and over to different locations. I love the free fridge idea, though. I just want to highlight that. I think that's so smart. It's basically self-serve donation drop off, which is super in those emergencies.
mhm.
Okay, we have another question in the Q&A. Do you have any tips or tricks for getting accurate and timely information from nonprofit partner agencies? We we seem to spend a lot of time tracking down holiday hours and closures from nonprofits.
Yeah, us too. Yeah, and the more you get, the more nonprofit partners you have, the harder that becomes. It's just communication, and their their hours, their contacts are going to change quite often. And that's just a hard thing to manage. And unfortunately, I do not have any tips or tricks because it's just hard.
Yeah, but I think you did say, you've already given us a tip or trick. You said it gets a little bit easier after the third time because folks know it's coming, right? And they know to expect when there's a holiday that you're going to call and ask for their hours. And so you may get some that are proactive. You may get some that are ready for that call and not, are ready to give you the information. And what happens is the more partners that make it easy on you, you have time for those that you have to track down, right? Because there's always going to be the problem folks, right? But if a bunch of people are just texting you automatically, they're sending you the information, some of them even proactively, then it leaves you the time to chase down those other folks, the bad actors. They're not bad actors.
I think,
Go ahead.
sorry, for us, something that helps, especially when, you have uncertain contacts, is if you Google the nonprofit and call their main line and like if they pick up, just say, hey, this is, this is Chloe from Food Rescue. Is this an okay number to use or can you provide me with one? I would just call their main line if you have, that's what I usually do when I can't get a hold of somebody. It's somebody will pick up.
Yep.
We've also, I guess, a little trick is we utilize the volunteers. We say, hey, you're going there. Can you get us a good number when you're there tomorrow? So yeah, utilize them because they're going to see them face to face.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of the volunteers have good relationships with the nonprofits, especially when they're going time and time again to the same location. They might even have their cell phone that they text them.
Yeah, they do for sure.
Yeah. Are there other questions? Oh, nope, there's a new one in the Q&A. All right. When deciding to close or not to close, Christy mentioned not being afraid to revise based on data available, staff morale, and other factors. When do you do that evaluation / revision? Is this at the beginning of the year, quarterly, the week before the closure?
Definitely not the week before the closure. Unless you're just talking about how you're going to do your reaches or make your communication. As far as the schedule, are you going to be open? Are you going to be closed? Until you get into a really good rhythm, I would say reevaluate that after each closing. Like do a post-mortem. How did this closure go? What could we have done differently? And then you can take that information into your next closure or into what does our holiday schedule look like.
Yeah. I mean, I think at least annually reviewing the holiday calendar for the year. I mean, I know that we recently made a revision sort of mid-year, but that was based on a couple of different factors and it threw some PTO into a little bit of chaos. So it's probably best to do at the beginning of the year if you can. But also if you get new information, right, and things dramatically change, there's nothing to say that you have to hold to something that you didn't know would affect you in January.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Are there other questions for us? There's no more in the Q&A. I think this is such an interesting topic for me because I mean, granted, and I will say this to anybody that asks, we didn't know what the hell we were doing when we started 412. We were just flying the plane as we build it, but we didn't even really think about what processes we should employ to close or whether we should even close. I mean, the first time there was a holiday, we were like, oh, what are we going to do? It, like took us by surprise, like holidays were new. So it's really it's a good thing to think about in advance and to create processes for if you don't already have them, and then to rethink about them on a regular basis. Christy, is there any chance you would share your SOP?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. We
All
will,
right. Small thing.
we'll add that. Actually, we can add a link to that to the email
Okay.
when we send that out. If you can just send that to Karen and ask her to include it, that'd be great.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, revise, revise, revise. You don't know everything when you start, just as you learn new things or as things change on your staff, you can go ahead and revise. Oh, one more question. It's Hassan again, the last question from him. Will you speak to how you handle volunteer rescues when your organization is closed, but the donor and NPP and volunteer would still like to do the rescue? And NPP means nonprofit partner for those that.
Mhm. We just let them do it. We're not gonna say no to that.
Pretty much the same here. Like if they're all on board, you let them know, like obviously, like, food rescue operations are closed, but blank wants to do this. You guys are open, you guys are open, you're on your own, you've done this before, you know what you're doing. Hopefully it's all good.
Yeah. And that's where that communication in advance comes in, that if something goes wrong, you're on your own. We're not staffing our phones, and so nobody's going to see that. And that's just what the volunteer needs to know. They have to not have the expectation that they'll still be able to get a hold of you if there's an issue.
I would say that most of the time in situations like that, it's seasoned volunteers. It's volunteers that have been doing the same rescue for at least a year, probably 4 or 5 years, whatever. So I would say that you probably won't run into that very much with the newer volunteers because they've formed those relationships. They know the situation.
Yeah. And the
But
seasoned volunteers are often the one that'll say like, oh, my nonprofit is closed. Can I take it here instead? And they'll love those folks. Christy?
no, that's yeah, great. Thank you, Chloe.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Well, last call for questions. If anybody has any questions, I am so grateful to you both for sitting in on this webinar and talking about this. I appreciate your wisdom from two sort of different size organizations, but both of you kind of really coming at it from the same direction, just slightly differently. And I think that's really helpful to see. So thank you everybody for being here. I dropped links in the chat wait, did I drop that for everybody or did I just drop it for my folks? Oh, I just dropped it for hosts and panelists. Hold on. Before you go, here it is. These are the links for the next webinar to register for that and to register for the conference. So please make sure you go ahead and do that. We would love to see you. The conference is going to be 2 days of really great information, all actionable, similar to the webinars, but with more guest stars and more topics. It's going to be great.
I'll be there.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chloe.
Thanks for
Bye.
having me.